you're gonna know what I'm talking about when you hear it. We need, you know, just like when you're doing a graph in a math class or statistics class, you need to name this side of it and you need to name this side. What is this side of this chart? If you think about it, what do you say when a paper is written using I? And I've corrected this on a handful of papers. So I think, Lloyd, I mentioned something to you about it. You know what I'm talking about? At the end, I looked at a draft of Lloyd's paper, and he had a question. It was really interesting, because he had a question. He said, I think I ended up in a different place from where I started out. And it was interesting because, yes, in a way he had, but he had shifted person in the middle of the paper. It started out saying, I do this, and then about 3/4 of the way through, he started saying you. Okay? So what he did, and now you're going to recognize what this is, he shifted from first person to second person. Does that start to sound familiar? This is first person. So when you write something in first person, you're using I, right? If you write something in second person, you're using you. What's this called? Obviously. Third. So this row is person, and this is first person, second person, and third person. Does that start to sound familiar to people? Okay, so if this is person, what's this? Right? Okay, so this is the number. And luckily, you only have to worry about 2 numbers in English. What are they? What's this? Yeah, this is singular. Somebody said it. And this is plural. So when we talk about first person singular, we're using I. First person plural, we're using we. Okay? This, like I said, America, England, English doesn't really have a second person plural. We just call it second person. Okay? Because we don't, the only word we have for this is a slang word. We don't use that, right? We don't use that for standard English. And then this is third person singular, third person plural. Okay? So when you conjugate a verb, Marcia, does this start to sound familiar from your Spanish?
Yes.
When can you, or can anyone conjugate the verb to do in English? Okay, can anybody conjugate the verb to do in Spanish? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay.
I still don't get it.
Think this is, can you conjugate the verb to do in Spanish?
Honestly, I still don't really understand what it means to conjugate.
Okay, that's what we're getting at. See, this is what my point is. I ask English speakers and even some second language speakers to do that, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. And that's what I'm getting back to this. Because we do all know that she don't is wrong, right? But what we're figuring out is why. Why does it tell us subject-verb agreement up there when we think it's a standard English error? Okay, so when you conjugate a verb in Spanish, any Spanish speakers, is this the verb to do in Spanish? My Spanish has been so long ago. Okay. What's this?
Yo.
No, but what's this? I do.
Yo,
Okay.
I go.
What's this? What's you do? What's you do in Spanish?
What's up?
What's this? Okay, see, yeah, you guys know this. What's this? If my Spanish is, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that right? What's this?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Is this right? I don't know. Anyway, here's the point. Sandra, can you do the rest of those? You see what we're doing?
I don't know.
Okay, what we're doing is we're taking this verb in Spanish, and now you're thinking, first we're doing a math class, now we're doing a Spanish class. What's going on? This is an English class, okay? But there's a reason for my madness. There's a purpose to this. Okay, this is what it means to conjugate a verb. And the reason I do it in Spanish is because it's easier to see in other languages that each one is different. You see what I'm saying? That's why we have to learn. In fact, this is where I first learned this, was in a Spanish class. Okay, and I'm not great in Spanish anymore. But what I do know is that when you conjugate a verb in Spanish, and then you have to go out here, and we're doing this in the present tense, and the past tense, and the future tense, all those are different again, right? You have to learn all these endings when you learn another language, okay? So luckily for us in English, okay, let's never mind the Spanish anymore. Now, what I would like you to do is conjugate the verb to do in the present tense in English. So what you're doing when you conjugate is you're basically putting this verb in each one of these boxes. So what do we say here? I do, you do, okay?
He did.
All right, and then over here, we do, you all do, and they do. Okay? Does that make sense? So this is why, when I say this to English speakers, I say conjugate the verb, they say, what are you talking about? Because all we usually really need to know is that the third person singular is different. All the rest of them are the same. Does that make any sense? And remember, our purpose is to figure out what this means. So when I say we have this phrase up here, when the Microsoft Word is telling us that this is a subject-verb disagreement error, what it's telling you is that this, whichever one you're using, whichever one of these you're using, doesn't agree with the pronoun, okay? And that's what we've got to do here. Who's the subject in that sentence? She. She's a pronoun.
She.
It could be a proper noun, right? It could be this. It could be a common noun. Okay? Whatever it is, it belongs in this box. It's a third person singular entity. And the verb has to agree with that. So that's all it means when it says all verbs must agree with their subjects in person and number, right? Okay? Okay, so now you're thinking, okay, if it's this easy, like we started out saying, I already know that's wrong, and I know how to fix it. All we do is change this to doesn't, okay? So why is Miss Penny making this big deal about having a whole lesson on this? Okay, because this isn't the biggest problem that you run into. Like I said, when we started out talking about this the other day, you guys all know that that's wrong and you know how to fix it. So it's not a problem. So what we have to look at is the places where this does become a problem in your writing. And if you make this error, and again, this is another reason that I start off on these different grammar lessons from the English Center, because you need to know what my green marks are. We've looked at the standard English. I have all those things where I'll say slang, usage, colloquialism, informal. Spelling, obviously, is this, right, SP. Okay, this one is gonna be this. And some of you have already seen that on your paper. S/E. So remember, you guys have, yes, I did give this to you in this class. You guys have that Miss Penny's correction chart. Did I hand that out in this class? Yes. So this is what we're working on here. We're working on, by the end of the semester, hopefully, figuring out what all these things mean. Okay? So some of these we already know. These are the non-standard. Okay? We're going to come down and do a lot of these other ones. Okay, so this one is S/V, subject, verb, discrete. Okay, so as we go, I'm hoping that you are understanding all this stuff. Okay, so let's look at the other problems we run into, and here's where your notes are going to come in. Definitely. With this, okay, yes.
I have a question about like my family, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Would I put? I could put my family don't, but you said I should change it to my family
Okay,
doesn't.
good. This is
right?
one of the things we need to talk about. I actually don't have it on this test, but I'll put it up here as a list. What Sandra is, as part of my list, what Sandra is asking is that she's saying my family, because the family obviously represents more than one person. When she says my family is doing something, does she say my family do, like they do, or my family does? Okay, and that's a really good question. What this is one thing you do, one of the ones that actually I probably should add back to this. Here's what I did. You might say, you guys are my guinea pigs this semester in more ways than one. I stopped using the English Center stuff. I went back to my old list of English grammar. But I'm kind of hybrid using their old tests, and I should have this on there and I don't. I'll add this, so I'll add this next time. What family is, this is called a collective noun. Okay? So if you say something like, the Army is no longer at Fort Ord. Okay? You notice what you say is, the Army is. Even though we know that the Army represents a whole lot of people, right? Okay, so what we're doing is we are treating Army as singular. Does that make sense to everybody? Which is why we have to look at this. So when we say Army is rather than the Army are, which sounds funny to us, right? We probably wouldn't say the Army are not at Fort Ord anymore, right? So what we're doing is we're conjugating that verb. We're deciding which one of these to use. And what we're deciding is that this noun is an it rather than a they. See how that works? That's why we have to have this chart up here. Okay, so Sanders is a really good question. So the rule is that so the same thing would go for family. You would say my family is rather than are. Does that make sense? Because family is treated as it's called a collective noun. Okay, good question. And those are usually singular. Okay, and something you'll notice with grammar teachers, we very rarely come flat out and say it's always this and it's always this, because there are some instances where that's going to sound off. Okay, so you don't want to just flat out say I'm never going to treat a collective noun as plural. But you see why we needed this in order for me to answer that question. I had to have this up here so you guys could understand what I was saying. Does that make sense? Okay, So the ones that are on your quiz today, the first thing we need, and here's what I usually say, watch for these things. When you're checking your papers for subject-verb agreement, you need to watch for these things. One is collective noun, okay? So if you write the Army R, I'm going to put SV, okay? The next one is what's called, and again, not only will you find grammar teachers never say never, in a sense, they also call things, call errors different things. I think the English Center calls it this. I call it lost subject. The English Center calls it nearest noun agreement. Okay, so in this sentence, it's pretty obvious. The girl don't, the girl doesn't. In other words, the verb immediately follows the subject. So we're pretty sure that the verb doesn't needs to agree with girl. But let me write a sentence up here and show you what students usually run into when they make this error. It's a little more complicated. Okay. The building of planned unit developments have been encouraged. So you're writing a research paper and you've chosen development on the Monterey Peninsula as your research topic, and you're going to research how they can build so many houses here without having any water, you know, all that kind of good stuff that they're arguing about. Okay, and you come to this sentence, and I haven't pushed enter yet, so if there's going to be an error, it hasn't showed us yet. And Miss Penny comes along and says, and writes SV on this, and you're thinking, what's wrong with this? And Marissa, what do you think this means? A lost subject or a nearest noun agreement error?
Does it mean you're missing a word in the sentence?
No, but you're getting there. You're not missing a word, but the word, the noun that the subject that you're trying to make the verb agree with is far away from it. So it doesn't say she don't, which you can immediately see, right? What's the subject of this sentence?
The building?
Building, okay. So here's the question I'm going to ask you. Does the verb in this sentence agree with its subject? No, because what's the verb?
Develop?
No.
Development? Encouraged?
Unit plan.
What's the, encourage is part of it, but what's the?
Have been?
Have, okay. So if we, here we go. If we conjugate the verb to have, we have I have, you have, it has, and building is this, right? So here's what happens, and this is important to you guys for your proofreading. What happens is we see, just like we saw she don't or she doesn't, we see developments have. So our eyes look at that and we think, that's right, developments have. But that's not the subject, okay? So guess what? And here's where Microsoft Word starts to drive people crazy. Your students are typing away and they say, what is wrong with this? Microsoft Word is telling me all this stuff is wrong and it's not wrong, okay? But it is pointing out to you that it recognizes building as the subject, which isn't it, a single thing. Then your verb is I have, you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is what you have to watch for. And sure enough, this is where it pops up. I know, I've got to find a way. I asked some computer guy how to do this, and he didn't know. It gives you two, sometimes, have you ever had to do this? It gives you two suggestions. It says, which one do you want to say? The building of planned unit developments has, or the buildings of planned units development have. So you've got to choose which one. It doesn't just fit the word, which is another thing. And this is what we're kind of going to be doing here in our grammar lessons, is looking at what happens in Microsoft Word. And students look at this and they say, I don't know, right? Okay, so the one we want, because our subject is this, the building has. So here's what this means. Your I is matching has with the nearest noun, which is development. So you come up with developments have, okay? But you need to go back and check what's really the subject of the sentence. Does that make sense? Microsoft Word will flag it for you. You have to figure out what's going on. Lost subjects means that there's so much stuff between the noun and the verb that you got lost. So either way you want to think of it. Does that make sense? So this is what we're really saying. A single thing has. But you get all that other stuff in there and you lose sight of what your subject of the word is. So it's easy to do. So as you can see, it's much different from she don't, because that's obvious. But be careful of the verb getting too far away from the subject. Then you get an S and you think, what's wrong? Okay, the other one is pretty simple. If you have two things, so you're going to watch for these things. Compound subject. This one is after the lost subject. This is pretty easy. If you say, and this usually happens when you, okay, does the subject agree with the verb in this sentence?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So then here's what usually happens, especially with you guys who are writing papers and revising them. You come along and say, oh, well, I want him to say somebody else. Have you ever done this? I do this when I'm typing a memo to somebody, and it's really embarrassing because here's this English teacher, and I come along and add something, I forget to edit the rest of the sentence, okay? Because I say, oh, I want to put that in there. Now does the verb agree with the subject? No, because now you've got two people doing the action. So now you've got a they, okay? So yeah, so just that, like I said, this is going to happen usually when you make a change. You usually don't write that down like that, but you go back in and edit a sentence, and you forget to read it again and make sure you fix everything. Okay? So that's what this is. Whoops, my notes are running into each other. And one of the things about taking notes is I always make sure that my notes are at least relatively clear. Some teachers don't. Lupe, are you taking notes? Good, okay. All right. So again, first rule of the road with college notes, write down everything you see on the board. Okay? And be aware of teachers who don't make their lecture notes clear. I had a teacher at Fresno State once who used to, he'd get the board all full of stuff, and then he'd start on some other topic, and he'd write his other notes like this. He wouldn't erase anything, he'd just write over here. So that's, you know, you're gonna find teachers who do not make clear notes. That's where you guys have to figure it out. So doing it, practicing it when a teacher does make clear notes is important. Okay, the other thing, this is a real annoyance. The other thing you have to watch for are what are called indefinite pronouns. And the problem there is these are definite pronouns. If you say I, you know you are talking about one person, singular. If you say we, it's definitely more than one person. It may be 3, it may be 10, but it's definitely more, okay? These are singular, these are plural. Indefinite pronouns are pronouns like this. Okay. Think about this sentence for a minute. Does the pronoun in this sentence agree with the verb?
I don't think so.
Yeah, these are the annoying little indefinite pronouns. However, yeah, as we think about it, what does everyone mean? When you say everyone, I'm talking to, right? So you're thinking, okay, yeah, she's talking to a bunch of people in a class. So everyone needs. But if you conjugate that, what it should be is they need, right? So you see where the problem comes in? So you're thinking, oh, wait a minute, Miss Penny said that they, if we conjugate the verb to need, I need, you need, he needs, we need, they need. So she's talking about everybody in the class. It should be, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So here's the trick. Everyone is considered an indefinite pronoun, okay? Which means that, just like in my example, it's not really clear whether I'm talking to every one person or a bunch of people, okay? So the rule for indefinite pronouns is the same thing as this. That's why I went ahead and put this up here, even though it's not on your quiz, because they're kind of the same idea. These are also usually singular. Now, this opens up a whole can of worms. The English Center has a list, and I think this is on one of your future, that's another thing about me doing this. You have it once here, and then a little bit later, you'll have this again in the English Center, so you can do it. They have a little list of pronouns that are singular, indefinite pronouns that are always singular. But some of them, it's kind of like, you know, if it really sounds weird, don't do it, okay? So that's why we say usually. The indefinite pronouns, and I will put these up here because these are the ones on your quiz. I'll just give you a little partial list. And I'll leave it up here. So one of them is everybody, okay? Everybody, and so when I say everybody needs to turn their paper in on time, I'm saying he needs, every one of you, every one body needs to turn his or her paper in on time. There's neither, so if we say neither Joe nor Sue, we don't say are. We say neither Joe nor Sue is going to the party. Does that make sense? Again, this goes back to this. If you say to somebody, you know, oh, if you find out if they're coming and you say, well, neither Joe nor Sue is coming, or neither Joe nor Sue are coming, nobody's going to stop you and nobody's going to say, wait a minute, your indefinite pronoun isn't right. You know, that's your informal spoken English. Don't worry so much about that. It's when you write it down in a paper, okay? Each one, each is, okay, each is, none, you don't say none are, you say none of them is. Some of this takes a little bit getting used to, because you do hear people saying none of them are, but technically that's incorrect, none of them is. Everybody, neither, each, none, yeah, those are the ones that are on the test. There are a whole lot more. Anyone, you'd be amazed at the number. The English Center has a list of them, but I'm not going to worry with you about that right now, because we're going to take this quiz, and these are the ones you need to worry about. So everybody is, neither is, each one. Think of one. Every one body, neither one of them, each one, and not one. You don't want to change that, but that's what that means. It means one. So these are indefinite, okay? And this is not on your test. This we just answered for Sandra, but it kind of goes along with the, it kind of goes along with these, whether they're singular or plural. Okay, so here's your quiz. We're going to do our same thing. We're going to say about 10 minutes for the quiz. Some of these are on yellow. I don't know how this happened. I must have had some yellow ones from last semester. About 10 minutes for the quiz, then take a break. So we're trying to be back by 11:15. Use a pen